Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our end-of-year webinar series. For today's webinar, AvidXchange, an invoice and payment automation expert, will discuss why you should make room for automation during your 2019 budget planning. My name is Brittany Shelley, and I am the Partner Marketing Manager here at AvidXchange. Before I pass it over to our main speaker for today, I would like to provide a quick overview of JMT as well as a few housekeeping items. So as you know, you are all in listen-only mode. However, if you do have any questions, we would love to hear from you. So all you need to do is enter those questions into the questions box in your control panel, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. You'll also see that we're going to launch a poll at the end of the webinar, and this is really just to allow us to capture the best way to follow up with you. In addition, following this webinar, we will provide you with the recording as well as the presentation deck, so just be on the lookout for that. Next, I'm just going to cover a little bit around JMT Consulting. So as a valued partner of AvidXchange, JMT is our proud sponsor for today's webinar. JMT is an ERP and financial management solutions firm with 27 years of experience specializing in nonprofits. Again, through our partnership with JMT, they have served over 2,000 nonprofit clients, and a number of those clients are currently utilizing AvidXchange's invoice and payment automation solution. And then the last thing I just wanted to cover is that if you are interested in attending any other upcoming webinars, you can see a few listed here. For any more information on these webinars, feel free to visit www.jmtconsulting.com/events. And now I'm going to pass it on to our main speaker for today, John Parisi. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Brittany. For everyone on the call, thank you for joining us today. Again, like Brittany said, my name is John Parisi. I'm an Alliance Manager here at AvidXchange. My main job here at Avid is to demonstrate really the benefits of AP automation to a wide range of partners and companies like yourself. I enjoy sharing the best practices with financial professionals and helping AP departments navigate the day-to-day that they see around their AP challenges. As Brittany stated, for today's webinar, we're going to talk about accounts payable automation, primary why you should make it a priority in your 2019 budget planning. My main goal today, I'll try to make it as entertaining as possible. You know, if you give me about 30 minutes, 35 minutes today of your time, I'll make this as impactful for you as possible as I can. As you all know, you guys are the ones that are actually will build a case for automation. So hopefully you'll hear a few good talking points that resonate with you. So this is what we'll end up covering on the webinar today. We're going to just quickly go over some high-level AP tips and tricks, why to budget for automation 2019, a quick overview on the benefits of a full year of automating. Then we're going to look at a 45-day implementation guide, and then we'll take a look inside of AvidXchange Invoice to Pay. So with that said, let's get started. So what you see here is just about 4 really quick tips for accounts payable. The very first one that we've seen is around implementing internal controls. As accounting managers or controllers, you should review your vendors list every month for changes to existing vendors or any new vendors that may be added. It's also very important to create a shared service environment. Invoices should be received and processed in one location. It's not a good practice to have those invoices coming into multiple locations and then funnel them up to, say, a corporate office. Best practice is always to have your vendors send them into your one location, preferably your corporate office there. This, what it does, it helps reduce errors and greatly improves the timeliness of those payments. The second one is around maintaining a clean master vendor file. I think these 4 aren't ranked order, but I think this is probably the most important one. what you want to do is consolidate all your vendor data, standardize on the company names, addresses, and other vendor information based on really some global standards. I just know I've worked for many different companies, and I think many companies run into this issue where they don't standardize on how that data should be entered into their systems. So they'll have multiple similar companies, the same company, entered into their systems multiple times because one may be Company X Inc. and the second time will be Company X Inc. with a dot in it. The systems will see those as two separate companies. And when you end up trying to pay, you'll end up paying companies multiple times. So I think having a clean master file is very, very important. You want to classify whether a payee is an employee and therefore needing either a W-4 or a W-2, or if they're a vendor, then that's going to put them into a W-9 territory. You want to remove any duplicates, like I was saying before, that you find in your master file. That really does lead into duplicate payments because you're going to end up having these duplicate vendors in your ERP system. And what you want to also do is archive inactive vendors. So if you have any vendors that you haven't paid, say within 15 or 18 months, best practice is to archive them and then to remove them from your master vendor list. The third one is to standardize the entire invoice process. Analyze your invoice workflow process. It's important to set up a centralized approval process to ensure a standardized and consistent approach. How you're going to handle all invoices that come into your system. All invoices should be processed. When I say process, I include entering the invoice, coding it, and routing it for approval. And that entire process should be done within 48 to 72 hours from the time you receive that invoice in-house. And just a side tip is to make all invoices come into AP first. Don't have the invoices sent in to say sales, and then sales will forward them over to AP. Just make it a best practice for those invoices to come directly into AP right at the get-go. The final tip is really to increase security to protect against fraud. Fraud is by far one of the leader causes for small businesses and medium-sized businesses. So, part of a good tax preparation process involves around protecting sensitive information and ensuring it's not improperly used by, either internal employees or by third parties. One solution is to digitize all the information and automate that payment process and to coordinate and centralize that workflow of all of that sensitive information that is coming into your company. By carefully managing the AP process throughout the year, companies can create a more robust platform for preparing and filing their end-of-year taxes. So what you're looking at here is typically is a traditional AP process. The billing process looks something like this. A invoice is created by your supplier that is sent into you. A lot of times that's going to be a paper invoice that arrives at your office. That could be by mail, it could be by fax, or they could send it through email into you. And then once it arrives, someone in your location has to receive it, either by the mail, they have to sort it. From there, it's going to have to go through some type of routing for approval. And then after it's approved, it's going to go to the AP staff. And they have a number of steps that they're going to have to take to process that invoice and hopefully at the back end for payment. All of this should sound pretty familiar for everyone on the call today, because these what we have seen, the flow of a typical invoice, independent of what size of organization that you may be working with. There are a lot of steps in the manual process, and there's ample room for delays, errors, duplicates, lost items. Invoices routing, if you think about it, is really inefficient and slow. Documents may get lost in mail. They may get lost between offices, or checks may not arrive on time. to their destination. Because of that, you may be incurring late fees. These are just a few of the problems inherent with a paper-based system compared to a automated system when you're looking at AP automation. So there's really a failure to adopt effective accounts payable processes. It really can hamper a company's ability to process invoices on a timely basis. Take advantages of available discounts and set either longer or shorter payment terms with suppliers, depending on which are most favorable. Here's a list of some of the common risks you may face, and some of those include, relying too heavily on more error-prone manual process to scan supplier invoices and to gain approvals and issue payments. You lose access to early payment discounts due to the longer payment cycles with a manual system. You neglect to take advantage of maximum savings through volume rebates, or you incorrectly load supplier information into that master file that we talked about earlier. You're not having a clear process in place to prevent late payments, duplicate payments, or you may even incur missed payments as well. So why should you budget for automation in 2019? There's a number of reasons why we believe you should. You have the ability to receive 100% of your invoices electronically. You could facilitate 100% of your data capture and your AP workflow automation to simplify the entire AP process that you're currently working with inside your company. You could pass AP data into your accounting system with no manual data entry on your end. So no longer are you keying in information from the invoices into your accounting system. And that just, when you do that, that just allows for a lot more errors, because the manual system is just prone to have more errors when you're entering that in manually. You'll have direct engagement with suppliers to identify their preferred payment type, and the verified payment information, when you do that, results in probably a 40% conversion to an electronic payment on average. So they'll move from receiving paper checks to maybe receiving enhanced ACH payment, or even receiving payment by a virtual credit card. There's a few key features that support your team during the year, and they include, read-only access for auditors. Imagine you no longer having to go looking through your filing cabinets for a particular invoice that they may be asking for. There's no more paper cuts. You no longer have to unstaple or restaple invoices. There's no more lost files. You no longer have to make copies of those invoices. AvidXchange really is able to provide auditors a read-only access to your data, so it allows them to quickly collect the information that they would be looking for. And when you do automate, you also have the ability with more robust reporting. By digitizing all of these transactions and making them part of more of a structured workflow, companies can automatically collect data to reduce more comprehensive reports for each quarter, but also at year end. With automation during year end, you can now search the invoices requested and just create one PDF file with all the information that may be required. We could now see that, when you digitize an invoice, you can see that invoice image. You'll have access to all the coding. You'll have the entire history of that invoice, which includes the approvals that are tied to that particular invoice as well. So there's a lot of benefits why you would want to look at budgeting your AP process for 2019. Here's just a real quick quote that we have from one of our customers as far as what they saw the benefits of moving from a manual system to an automated system at year end. And one of the things I do want to point out is really the issue around pending approvals by a responsible user. So at year end, you may have invoices that need to be paid, but they haven't been through the system. You could create a report and you could see which invoices are still pending for approval, and then go to that particular individual and say, John, there's an invoice that is sitting in your inbox. We need it to approve so we close out not only the month, the quarter, but we also need it to close out the year. So it gives you the information that you need as the AP department to do what you need to do, and that is to close out the year. What's really nice with automating the entire AP process, it's more than just not only on the front end with receiving the invoices, but we also work with your suppliers as well. We have what's called the AvidXchange Supplier Portal. All of it revolves around saving time and labor. With our portal, your vendors have 24/7 access to invoices that have been received. It'll tell them the status of all the approvals that have taken effect on any of their invoices. But most importantly, it'll also tell them if you have made payment for those invoices and when they will be paid. This allows suppliers to gain better visibility into the real-time cash flow on their end, so they could figure exactly when they're going to receive payment from you. So it does help improve their cash flow on their side. But what it really does is it also eliminates the need to pick up a phone on their end and sort through all the files and emails, to research and to fill any of these outstanding receivables. Instead of you having to handle all the calls, because your suppliers are calling you for two things typically. They're going to be calling you for one, to see if you received their invoice. The second call you're going to receive from them probably within a couple of minutes after the 90 days that it was due is, have they been paid for it? So with the supplier portal, they could do it all themselves. They could look into it. They could see when the invoice was received. They could see where it is in the workflow, exactly where it's at. The third one, they could see when it will be paid. So we try to help not only you as the customer, but also your suppliers as well. When you hear about automated AP solutions, a lot of people will hear this term. They hear the term automation, they instantly think that there's going to be layoffs and staff reductions. While that can be a byproduct of automation, it's not the goal. The basic idea of what we're trying to do is make the workplace more efficient, and is to have the same number of people, but to get more done with them. With automation, that is really the goal of it. Not to reduce the work force, it's really to reallocate them to more higher value activities. Also considering the alternative, automating AP, it's a pretty easy decision. If there's one question you should ask yourself is, how many people write checks today? For a lot of small businesses, it's about 80 to 90% of their bills are paid by check. It's not about replacing people. It's really about increasing efficiency. So let's look at what that 45 to 60-day roadmap, the transition roadmap, would look like. The very first thing you should do is understand your costs and potential savings. The first step is to organize your transition to more efficient AP department. Starts with really on your side of the house. Gather important data like invoice volumes, the average cost per invoice, the other metrics to create a business case. But remember to take into account the resources on your team when estimating both the cost to upgrade, but also the long-term cost savings. Same thing on the roadmap is, build a list of your unique system requirements. Some AP solutions can provide a great automation right out of the box, but what I've seen and what we found is that many companies require some type of custom development to integrate with their existing accounting system or their other software systems that they may be using in their organizations. because they may need some type of custom features. So use these to build a project roadmap that shows the development and the operational milestones and target dates over the course of the upgrade project. And the third one is, like we were saying before, turn suppliers into partners. AP automation can lead to accepting e-invoices from your suppliers, but that won't happen unless those suppliers are thought of as partners in the upgrade process. Remind your suppliers that the upgrade that you're doing will help them as well. They could cut down cost on their side, and most importantly, they could get paid faster thanks to this new system that you're adopting. And the last one is to access success and areas of improvement. Once you have flipped over to an automated system, you just can't trust that, everything will work as expected. There's always going to be a little glitch here or there. So create benchmark goals that you expect to surpass with the new system and investigate any failures or opportunities for improvement. So let's take a look at how we here at AvidXchange look and handle invoice and pay through the entire system itself. So what you're looking at here is really what we see is the life of automation, or really what automation looks like after AvidXchange has been adopted. So the flow is typically what you see in many organizations. Anywhere you see an AvidXchange logo, which is where it's the green circles and the X's, this is where either AvidXchange will have software or a service will step in to automate the manual task. Where you don't see our AvidXchange logo, the blue circles, those are steps that are unique or critical to your business, where you will still remain and maintain 100% control. This doesn't mean we do not have tools for you to help automate these steps. It's just things such as, smart coding. You'll still have 100% control over, exactly where those invoices and which GL codes they should be applied to. A couple of things to note. AvidXchange is SaaS-based, so as long as you can access the internet, you'll be able to access AvidXchange. It's also mobile responsive. For what I mean by mobile responsive is no matter what type of device you have, you'll be able to view your invoices on those devices. So it's the way you see it on your computer screen, when you look at it on your mobile device, it's going to be customized and formatted so you can see it either on a mobile device, your iTab, or any of your tablets. And the system will optimize it for each of those unique devices as well. So what we like to say, there's no app needed because we're using the mobile response technology. So let's talk a little bit before I jump into the product itself as far as how invoices can get into the system. It's pretty simple. There's 3 ways that a invoice can come into the AvidXchange environment. The very first one is email. We'll designate an email address for your suppliers so they can send those invoices to us electronically. You could scan invoices into the system. So if an invoice were to be dropped onto someone's desk in AP, you can scan that and have that scanned image imported into AvidXchange. But we also know that majority of the invoices are still received by the U.S. mail. So you could receive them by either paper or mail. We'll set up a designated lockbox for you. At that point, we'll gather and scan into the system all those invoices twice per day, depending on when we receive it. If we receive those invoices prior to 3 o'clock, those invoices will be available for your review that day. Anything that's received after 3 o'clock, they'll be available to you the first thing the next working day. Once we receive the invoice, we're going to extract all the header detail around that invoice, including the purchase order number, and we'll submit it into the Avid Invoice tool. Once we submit it into the tool, this will initiate the approval of the invoice based on a number of predefined rules, conditions, or logic. I mean, however you have your workflow currently, we're going to be able to mimic that in our tool. So let's take a look at what the solution looks like. So when you log into AvidXchange, this will be the initial screen. Everyone will have a unique username, password, so you just enter those in. And the very first screen you're going to see is what we call this home screen, or my invoice page. So after we receive the invoice, along with the header details, the invoice will be routed to what, again, to this my invoice page. Again, invoices can be received into us by mail, scanning, or by electronic email as well. So there's a number of ways these invoices will come into this into our system. This represents what you're seeing here is all the invoices received and requiring action for each user. The invoices could be coded, or an individual can have just a simple review. Users have easy access to all their pertinent data, from the invoice number, vendor IDs, the name of the customer, all the way down to the amount. You can also configure your view to see only the data that's most important to you. So you can hide these columns to customize it the way you would like it to be seen. And once you make those changes, just know those changes will only affect your view and not the view of others. If you simply want to review the invoices, and you're not really responsible for coding, then you can easily just check all the boxes for all those invoices in the queue and quickly approve them. If you're the one responsible for coding the invoices, you could just then select those invoices by number for review, and then this brings up the invoice detail page. You'll also see this second tab on your My Invoice page. This tab is for any invoices that may be in dispute. So you may want to check those first, the first thing in the morning. If you see an invoice that's on this tab, that means there's something that you need to look at. It could be that the quantity was off, the dollar amount was off. There's a reason why it has not flown through the workflow completely. So instead of you having to search through all of these pending invoices to see which ones there may be an exception, we're able to pull all those exceptions out, bring them onto a separate view for you. It'll make it easier for you to process any of those disputed invoices. So after all the invoices and you decide which ones you want to view, what you see here is on the left, you can see all the header information that was keyed in by AvidXchange. What we found is, a lot of people do ask us, what type of OCR technology you use. What we found in our 18 years of being in business is OCR technology still is not 100% accurate. It's still going to result in errors. But we know all the information that is going to eventually flow into your accounting system, it can't be 90%. It needs to be 100% accurate. So we actually have two teams, one in our Charlotte office and one in our Salt Lake office, and they're going to key in all this information for you instead of just relying on OCR technology. We do have some key tools that will help process this information quicker, but just know all that information that is on that invoice, we're going to be keying that in. So it's 100% accurate when we do transfer it over to your accounting system. On the bottom is where the distribution line coding will take place. It's, as I stated earlier, we have some smart coding tools. Some smart coding tools that can help you pre-populate some of this information, such as default GL. So every time you receive an invoice from a specific supplier, 100% of those invoices will then pre-populate to a specific accounting code. We also have some smart coding that we call is use previous. This feature will remember how an invoice was previously coded. So once an invoice is entered, The system's going to remember the distribution lines associated with that particular supplier and the supplier account number and any of those combinations. I'd also remember if there's any unique descriptions or GL accounts or how you want to allocate a particular invoice. It'll remember all of that for you. And we'll also have import distribution. So it'll allow users to populate a template, and then from that template, it'll tell us as far as how to import the different distribution lines. All of the smart coding, you could either have it turned on or you could turn it off. You decide that during our implementation process itself. This next screen is what you're looking at is the Comet Screen. It's a great place to track any communications that is happening around this invoice record. You know, think about all the communications that may be occurring over the phone, via email, or even in person. You know, now you have access to all that information in one centralized location. No longer will you have some of that information in your CRM system, some of the information stored in your email system. Now you can store all of that in one system. You can have a historical view of all the communications that revolve around a particular invoice. You know, logging in a comment is, you know, as simple as type in any notes and then just selecting log comment, the log comment button. It's that simple. When you're submitting, you can also have the option of sending those comments via email to that particular individual, but just know it's not required, but you do have that capability. This next screen is probably one of the most important ones. It revolves around the workflow. The workflow tab contains the information regarding the workflow the invoice is currently in. You can see where the invoice is currently at. It's highlighted in blue here, as well as the next step in the process. One great thing about our workflow engine is that you have the ability to set timers and alerts at each of these steps of the workflow. What it allows you to do is set these timers. So after a particular number of days, if that invoice hasn't had any action taken on them, it will alert that person, and it'll also send a note and generate a report, and will be sent to a manager, so action can be taken. You'll also have the ability to build conditional steps. This allows you to insert a step in the workflow only for those invoices that say meet a particular dollar amount. Only if the invoice, say, is greater than $5,000 will the VP need to approve the invoice. Some additional internal notes or workflow logic that you could build in. One is supplier default workflow. So the application, when we look at that invoice, we will first look to see whether who that supplier is, and has that supplier been assigned to a particular individual. And if it has, that invoice will be automatically routed to them. Another one is having a default workflow. The application will look at, say, a location of the company or the entity or the department, and based on those rules, it could flow to a particular individual in your organization. What we could also do is, on a need-to-be cases, we could add a ad hoc approver, if you would like, into a workflow. So if you had an invoice come in and it's a little out of the ordinary and you want someone else to approve it, but they're typically are not in the standardized workflow, you could add them in and push them into the workflow for that one-time approval process. And then once they have approved it, you could remove them. So once you remove them, they are no longer part of the standardized workflow, but you just invited them in for that one case, and then they're completely removed. So it's a really nice feature that we do have inside of our workflow engine. What you look at here is the history tab. The history tab is, think of it as an automatic audit trail. It's really capturing all the actions performed on each invoice. You know, anything modified, all the details that have occurred with that invoice, any changes, along with the person that made those changes, there'll be a date stamp associated with each of those changes, and it'll be tracked within inside the system. And really the best part about it is that all of this information, it's all reportable. So that was really a high-level overview as far as how you get an invoice into the system and what an invoice looks like in the system to get approved. The very last step is making the payment of that invoice back to your suppliers. We have what's called the AvidXchange pay application. And what this really does is it really ties you as the customer, and it ties together your suppliers together. So when we pull that payment file from your accounting system, it's going to pull into our AvidXchange pay application. And then you still will have complete control on which of those invoices you want to make payment on. So you can log into the system. You'll have a list of all the invoices that need to be paid. And then you could click on which of those you want to make payment on. And then at that point, we'll facilitate payment to your suppliers. Because we have the supplier network, this network contains about 450,000 suppliers. So typically when a new customer comes on board, we probably have close to 30 to 35% of your vendors already in our system. What that helps us to do is we know how they want to get paid. We know that do they want to receive payment by an ACH payment? We'll actually know if they would like to receive a virtual card payment by a credit card. But if they prefer to receive payment still by check, we're happy to cut them a check as well. Just know that what we know is with dealing with checks by far is the largest area that many businesses deal with fraud. And with our service, we offer this fraud protection. So you no longer have to produce a positive pay file to your bank. We'll provide that to your bank automatically. And another nice service that we do have with our AvidXchange pay service is for any checks that may be outstanding, we'll actually do the initial follow-up to your suppliers. So we'll reach out to them a number of times if we see a check that has not been cashed. So we'll call them on your behalf, asking them first if they received it, and two, if they will be cashing that check in any short due time. If we can't reach your supplier after 3 or 4 phone calls, we'll reach back out to you and see if we get some additional help from your side to help get that payment through the system. You'll also have visibility 24/7 on the status of the payments, so it'll help as far as your suppliers with better cash flow. So I hope that gave you a good idea as far as just a high-level overview as far as how AvidXchange looks at the entire invoice to pay. Taking an invoice that was in a manual system, moving into a automated system where you could take a paper invoice, scan it into the system. Now it's completely digitized, completely indexed. You could easily search on it. From there, it goes into the workflow. No longer are invoices sitting on anyone's desk. If it's during the holidays and someone takes a vacation during the holidays, then invoice today, if it's manual, it's going to sit there until they return. With an automated system, if that person goes on vacation, they could delegate someone else to sit in their place. So that invoice, instead of it going to me, it's going to go to this delegate person while I'm on vacation or on leave. And then after it goes through the approval process, we're going to be able to handle the electronic payment for you as well. And then there's all the benefits of the electronic payments, from the positive pay, reduction in fraud, but also the increased satisfaction that your suppliers will have from you moving to a automated system. So with that, Brittany, I would love to hand it back over to you.
Great, thanks, John. So I know a lot of great content was covered there, and thanks you to all the attendees for sticking around. Just a reminder, we will be sending out the recording of the webinar as well as the presentation deck following this. You will see that I just launched a quick poll. Again, this just allows us to know the best way to follow up with you. So if you can please just take a few seconds to answer that while we start to run through Q&A. And as a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the questions box. So we have one question, John, and that question is, do all of my vendor payments have to go through AvidPay?
Yes. AvidXchange, I mean, our purpose is to accommodate all your vendor payments. Only payments that you select to be paid by AvidXchange will be facilitated by us. Example of payments that a company may ultimately want to retain and execute themselves are, say, payments related to employee reimbursements or wire payments, or inter-office or intercompany reimbursements, or dividends to shareholders, or cross-border payments, or even employee payroll. So they have complete control as far as which payments will come through our system and which ones we would facilitate.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we have about 50% that have answered the poll, so I'll just keep it up for a second longer. Another question that we had come in, John, was, will my invoice approval process need to change? No, not at all. We'll work with you during the implementation cycle with AvidXchange, and we'll set up the system the way you want it to work. So if you have a single layer approval process or a more complex multi-layer approval where you have approvals based on dollar amounts or by location, geo, or by company, we'll mimic whatever your current approval process is in our system. So we're not looking to change your process. We're just trying to make it more efficient. Great. Thank you, John. And it looks like we have one more question. And I know we briefly covered around the AvidPay network, but one of them were if they can still print checks. Yep, you sure can. If we do offer a self-managed payment option that enables you to print microchecks on blank check stock. So yes, you can still print your own checks if you would like to. Perfect. Thank you. You're welcome. And that looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. So again, I just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. If you do have any additional questions that you may not have put in the questions box, we will be following up with everyone after the webinar. Again, feel free to reach out directly to JMT if you have any additional questions around specifics for your business. I hope that everyone has a great day and a wonderful weekend. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.